Liberty Nation. Truth is making a comeback.
Welcome back to LibertyNation.com's Midweek Roundtable. This is Scott Cosenza, Legal Affairs Editor for LibertyNation.com, and I'm joined today by Joe Schaefer, who is our national correspondent, Mark Angelides, who is our managing editor, and Graham Noble, who is our political correspondent, I guess. Welcome all.
Hi, Scott.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and a special accommodation, I guess Joe kind of subbed in last minute for Sarah, who's driving across the country, so we thank him for that availability and for Graham's continual availability in the wake of the devastating storms in North Carolina. How are things in North Carolina? How's the recovery going, Graham?
Here in Wilmington, in the city, there are still neighborhoods that are kind of being put back together. But it's more outside of the city, in the outside areas that had a much rougher time of it. And so there's still a lot of relief efforts ongoing for those places. So a lot of people are still, not back in their houses yet, or trying to clean up their houses or even rebuild them. So we, right here in the center of Wilmington, we were somewhat fortunate. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are still having a real tough time. The flooding really was the biggest problem, the flooding
right.
Post-hurricane. As
was the case in New Orleans, right? Okay, well, let's turn to equally sad news, I think, which is the state of the Supreme Court and nomination process we find ourselves in. We're recording a little early, the midweek show, and it's one of those things where the news is changing moment by moment here. So Kavanaugh is still under investigation through the extended process that Donald Trump commanded the FBI to engage in to ameliorate Jeff Flake's concerns that the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee are not acting, I guess, and have a legitimate desire to search for more truth about Judge Kavanaugh's record. So I want to go around the horn here, and I want to ask, would you vote for Judge Kavanaugh, yes or no, if the measure had been set before you before this additional background check? And then, and what, if anything, would you think would be disqualifying with the background check? So please, Joe.
Well, I mean, there's nothing here, absolutely nothing here that any fair-minded person could use to disqualify this man. This has been a smear attack throughout. Vague, decades-old accusations going back to high school, people coming out of the woodwork accusing him of new things. Extending this a week with the FBI investigation just encourages more last-minute ridiculous accusations to come forward. There is no disqualifying information. They would have come up with it long before this. This is a Hail Mary pass that Dianne Feinstein attempted at the last minute, I think against her own better political judgment. That's why.
Let me interrupt you right there, Joe, and ask a question. You say it was a last minute attempt by Dianne Feinstein, and we know that she held on to that letter and did do a last minute sort of Pearl Harbor job on the nomination, if I can. I don't know, you allowed to say that in 2018? Anyway. But we also know that Ms. Ford sent that letter before Judge Kavanaugh was Trump's named pick as the nominee. So he was just in a universe of selectees where that pick would be drawn from. So I don't think that's a fair criticism of Ms. Ford, meaning that timing criticism.
Okay. Well, what evidence does she have? How substantial is this? Is that even taken into account for 1 second? Can anybody just pop out of someone's past and make these accusations? Have no credible, really believable information to bring to bear to that? And we're supposed to have the FBI investigating. We're supposed to put off the nation's business for days, weeks, months?
It would be years if we ask the bigot Mazie Hirono until the Democrats have a president who's a Democrat and control the U.S. Senate. All right, let's turn to across the pond. Actually, we'll get a view from a little far away there. Mr. Angelides, what's your view of the situation?
Well, to answer your first question is,
Mhm.
I would personally vote in Judge Brett Kavanaugh because he was the person recommended by President Donald Trump, and President Donald Trump won a Democratic election, and he released his list of prospective justices beforehand, so we already knew who he was going to choose from.
Well, Kavanaugh was on the supplemental list, as a matter of fact. So, yeah.
He
So,
was on a list.
yes. No, I appreciate, there is this is the Lindsey Graham model. It sounds like you are kind of advocating for, which is that a president is chosen by the people, and the president, absent some extraordinary, compelling reason why he shouldn't have his pick, he should be accorded the right to pick the justices.
Absolutely, he should.
Would you afford the same? Go ahead.
So, just to come back to Joe's point that you sort of rebutted there about the letter coming in before Judge Kavanaugh was being nominated, to suggest that this information was only there available. What was going through my head then was that I honestly believe that they have a file like this on every single prospective person that Donald Trump could have picked, and they've got a file, and they've got people who are willing to either provide true stories or that they're true accounts.
It's like this. Okay, it's number 82. Go ahead and release.
And they pull out the file.
right.
Then there it is.
Yeah.
Now, some of those will be real accounts, real things that these people have done.
Right.
In this case, I think it's just people are willing to lie.
Okay. Mr. Graham, what do you have to say?
Well, yeah, certainly I would have personally supported Kavanaugh's nomination from the get-go here. I think, the Senate's constitutional role in this procedure is one of, as we've heard recently so many times, is one of advice and consent. And to me, if Senator Feinstein had been fulfilling her proper role as a U.S. Senator, then she would have brought this matter to the president's attention the moment she received the letter from Ms. Ford. And I have mixed feelings about Ms. Ford. I know that she is basically, to one extent or another, a kind of a left-wing activist type person. And I am not going to jump on the bandwagon of people who've said, oh, she sounded so credible and she's just being manipulated. And she's, I didn't buy all that whole clueless victim act that she put on at the hearing.
Does she want to be Dr. Ford, the accomplished professor who's to be addressed as an adult, highly intelligent, highly accomplished adult who we can speak to matters on, or is she a little child who has been so damaged by events early in her life that she need to be coddled like the thinnest of eggshells? How can you have it both ways? That's what I think about in the wake of it. Is you can't have it both ways.
It's a spectrum.
No, you can't indeed. And coming back to Feinstein, if her motives had been pure in this matter, then she would have fulfilled her advice and consent role as a senator. And once she got Ford's letter, she would have gone straight to the president and to the
to the Senate. Did you answer the question? I don't even remember.
And said we have to do something about this now. Obviously, they let it go, yes. As we all know.
I think we all agree, yes.
After the hearing, and then sprang this to further delay the process, and that's all this is about.
So are you a yes vote for Judge Kavanaugh if the vote was held this past weekend?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And will you be looking for anything in particular? Is everybody of the mind that this FBI thing is basically, this investigation is basically a sham designed to just frustrate the process rather than a genuine attempt for more information? I think that's where I am with it.
I would say that, yes, I agree that's what it's in place for, but I wouldn't say that it's worthless in any way. Because if it hadn't gone ahead, then there would always be this shadow hanging over Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, this is a great point, Mark. I think that for those of us that are kind of in the arena of talking about these things passionately, whether, and it doesn't just mean because we're on this side of the camera. For other people that are, thoroughly engaged, watch all the hearings, that's sort of one subset of people. Then they have the sort of normal people. They're going about their lives. They're not consumed with Judge Kavanaugh. They read it in the headline like you read scores to a sport that you don't follow, perhaps, except that you're maybe more concerned with it because it's the Supreme Court. I was speaking to a friend earlier today, as a matter of fact, and he just said, well, yeah, there's lots of lawyers out there that can do the job, and he's not a lefty by any means, but you throw enough rocks at something, you're going to dent it, right? And I think that for a lot of the people, that's where we are with the nomination. But at the same time, for the activist Republican set and the Liberty the movement set, this is war, right? The battle lines are now drawn, I think. So what do you think? Am I crazy, or is that where we are?
I have a simple question here, and I'm not a legal expert, so I will defer to you guys if you can answer it. But doesn't there have to be some burden of proof before you can go with such a huge accusation against a human being? I mean, this is the problem I think most Americans have. If you can have a big circus about these they're thin accusations based on the lack of evidence, then what can you not subject a politician, a judge, a Supreme Court nominee to in the future? It seems like you're opening the door to any accusation.
Joe, what I said to my friend when he said that to me was, and then what happens when the hearing on this new lawyer is about to conclude, and then we hear about in college that he inappropriately touched this girl, right? Because to your point, nothing is to stop it, and there is no legal prohibition except for the prohibition against filing a false police report, and you can always sue somebody for libel or slander. We had the case with Ms. Julie, is it Swetnick, that I wrote about for LibertyNation.com, where she had this sworn affidavit that, sworn statement signed under penalty of perjury, where she makes these allegations, and then she goes on TV with Ms. Snow at NBC News and basically says, well, what she said was a 10, now it's a 7 or nothing. She said that she knew that Kavanaugh drugged people. This Avenatti, I'll tell you what, man, he knows how to write a statement to say one thing that may be technically true, but it doesn't actually disclose the facts. He said spiked punch, as in like nobody knew it was being spiked. I mean, when I go to a party and I see somebody spiking the punch, it's like, oh, finally we can drink that punch, right? Like it's ready to go. It's not like this big secret that it's now alcoholic. Like teenagers want to drink what? Fruit punch that's not alcoholic at an after hours party. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move along then. What I just want to say, Trump seems to be, at this point anyway, to be holding fast with the nominee. There's been some talk in the Democrat sort of media circles that Kavanaugh may withdraw. Now, whether those are sort of feeler balloons or, who knows at this point. But do you think that come hell or high water, Trump's going to stay the distance with Kavanaugh and keep him in place and go through with a vote, even if it may be a squeaker, depending on the results? Or in terms of the political angle, what do we see here? And I'll go to Graham. I'll go to Graham first on that, please.
Well, from my perspective, I think that it would be a huge error for either Trump to suddenly kind of withdraw Kavanaugh's nomination. And I think it would be a huge error for Kavanaugh himself to withdraw his nomination, because once that happens, the left will simply say, well, that kind of proves that they're admitting that, in fact, there was something to these charges after all. After all, if he was innocent, why would he withdraw from the process? Why would the president withdraw his name? I also think from the point of view of the president's base, it would be a disastrous display of weakness, which, let's face it, seems a bit uncharacteristic for President Trump. So I think that no good could possibly come out of backing down over this. And I hope that the president sticks by Kavanaugh, and I hope that Kavanaugh himself continues to do the Clarence Thomas Act, if you like, and absolutely refuse, say I'd basically rather die than withdraw my nomination. And I think they should go through with it. And I think they should get Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, if for no other reason than just to stick it to the Democrats.
This is now, I think that's a common position, and it is like a battle lines have been drawing. Joe, what do you think?
I agree with everything Graham said. I think it would be a disaster for the Republicans. I read an article yesterday, I don't remember where, but it was a news article saying that Democrat and Republican pundit officials agree that this would be such a display of weakness by a Republican Party that controls the White House and both houses of Congress and really hasn't done a lot with it in the last 2 years. If you can't even get a Supreme Court nominee through when you control Congress and the White House, what can these people do? Trump knows this. Trump's strong. Trump wanted to defend Roy Moore a lot more than was defended, because he realized you cannot show weakness to a pack of hyenas. And the Republican establishment has shown weakness time and time again. It's what they do. If they back down, if they don't go to the wall for Brett Kavanaugh, this is going to hurt the Republicans a lot more than even just having him being rejected on a vote.
I saw some news outlet play a clip from Steve Bannon's appearance on Bill Maher's program over the weekend, and it was sort of like marching orders to the Republican elected that said, "The base will not forgive, cowardice in the face of this enemy." Mark, what do you have to say about it?
For me, it all comes down to the cost. Not the financial cost, but the cost to the individuals involved. If Brett Kavanaugh withdraws, his life is effectively over as a judge, as a teacher, as somebody who can walk around his hometown. His life is officially over. So for him, the cost of withdrawing is far too high. And again, for President Trump, the cost is, as you both pointed out, it's far too high. It's you've got a Congress controlled by the Republicans. You've got the White House controlled by, let's call him a Republican, just because. And if he pulls back on that, then the cost is the presidency in 2020. It's both houses. It's just a sign of weakness. And as Joe says, that they'll attack when they spot weakness.
I think that you're right about Kavanaugh's probably his sort of math on the cost involved, but you may not be factoring in the family picture, which is that there are people who are in his ear that are saying it isn't worth, potentially that are in his ear saying this is not worth the cost. Meaning, but in any case.
I agree with you to an extent, but again, that's I have measured that into the cost with this.
Okay. Yeah, I think that for him, I would say you're right. Just go.
Well,
you're either going to be a Supreme Court justice who's hated or whatever and scorned by half the people, or nothing. But this sort of middle ground where he is now seems untenable for him going forward, right? Maybe rapist or something like that.
But this happened with Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas went through all of this. It was just as ugly. It was horrible. And
I think you're wrong about that, Joe. I think this is way uglier than what happened to Clarence Thomas. I was alive and engaged in the debate as a keen observer at that time. I watched all the hearings, and it was captivating sort of with the nation. But this level of...
Wow, I disagree. I think you're underestimating how ugly it got with Clarence Thomas. Pubic hairs on the Coke can and the porno collection or whatever it was. They really trashed that guy pretty bad.
Judge Kavanaugh has been accused of being the organizer or chief lieutenant of a multi-event national capital area gang rape party scene featuring the sons and daughters of DC elites as victims and participants. That's where we are with the, I don't know. I'll put that up against hair on a Coke can any day, Joe.
The
But
point is,
all right.
they dragged them both through the mud,
Yes.
and Clarence Thomas survived just fine. He's had an excellent career on the High Court.
And, actually, it's funny. I think he has had an excellent career in terms of his jurisprudence. I read Clarence Thomas's opinions with care because I think he is he has an excellent legal mind, and I appreciate but people do say that it damaged him for decades and decades. He doesn't speak publicly from the bench, and they say it really damaged that part. I mean, I don't think that it damaged the Republic in terms of we weren't denied his judging services, but I mean, the human being, Clarence Thomas, I think was, that was a body blow to him that I think he still feels. Okay. Crystal ball time, exit question. It's October. Monday was October 1st. We had the Supreme Court's first day in session for the new term. Let's give him a month for the purposes of our hypothetical. 1 month from today, is Judge Kavanaugh on the bench in the United States Supreme Court as an associate justice? Around the horn, Joe first. Yes or no, please?
He is definitely going to be confirmed. He will be a Supreme Court justice. This is going to hurt the Democrats so much more in the long run. They always fall for the 24 news hour cycle bait. Try to win that. Don't look at the long-term picture. They are forfeiting all trust, any shreds of trust that they have with the American people, just lighting their reputations on fire to take cheap shots at this man. And the American people are going to make them pay for this down the line.
All right, I'm going to put you down as a yes then. Mark Angelides.
I'm going to say yes, he'll be serving on the court. However, the method of getting there, I suspect that the method of getting there will involve Vice President Mike Pence casting a vote.
Okay, that's a yes for Mark. Graham Noble.
Yes, I think he'll be there, and beyond that, I don't have any more predictions about that situation. I think he'll be there, but final thought from me is what I would like to see the within hours of him being confirmed. I would like President Trump to come out and announce that he already has his next Supreme Court nominee lined up.
All right. Well, just to be a contrarian, I will say no to the question, and and I'll give my reasoning because it's a little bit more than just being contrarian. I think that perhaps Judge Kavanaugh did perjure himself, not with respect to anything regarding assaulting women, but with respect to some of the details of, namely some of the yearbook activity that he had to testify to. I don't think it was appropriate for Congress to make him testify to irrelevant activity from when he was a teenager. And I think he should have refused to answer those questions. But I think maybe he did perjure himself. And I think that'll give cover, if the FBI discovers that and presents that evidence, that'll give cover to a lot of people to say, well, clearly it doesn't matter what the import of the lie was if it was present. So for Joe Schaefer, Mark Angelides, Graham Noble, this is Scott Cosenza. Thank you so much for joining us. Please visit libertynation.com for all sorts of great content. And, it's free of charge, but if you want to help us out, you could like, comment, and subscribe. That really does make a difference. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Visit us at libertynation.com.